Hi, I'm Dave Hamilton, Director of Operations at the Advanced Energy Center. On our show today, we'll be exploring energy, the energy that we require to stay alive, and the energy it takes to become stars in our fields of work. Let's get right to it. My guest today is Bob Catell. Bob is the chairman of the Advanced Energy Center. Welcome, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Good to be here.
Glad you're here. Thank you. Let's just jump right in. So tell us about growing up in Brooklyn. I know you were raised by a single mom. You're a Brooklyn boy, now on Long Island. But why don't you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how you got going?
Sure. Well, I'm a Brooklyn boy, and as you say, I live on Long Island, lived on Long Island longer than I lived in Brooklyn, but you can never take Brooklyn out of the boy. I grew up in Brooklyn. Brooklyn Dodgers were the lifeblood of Brooklyn until they took them out to Los Angeles. And yes, I was raised by a single parent, my mother. She worked hard, and me and my sister, I have a sister, a single sibling, and we had a great growing up. Even though we were poor, we didn't know we were poor because she took good care of us. She got sick later in life. I had to take care of her, but that was all fine. It was appropriate to give back. I had the benefit of going to City College when it was tuition free. I could not have gone to college otherwise, but I did get a great engineering education at City College and went on to start to work in the utility industry. Didn't know I was going to stay there as long as I did, but spent the next 50 years of my life in the energy utility industry. So I had a great upbringing in Brooklyn, and it led to a great career in the utility industry.
Well, I can say I've met your mom. She was a great lady. It was a pleasure knowing her. So, she'd be proud of you for where you are and what you've done. Let's talk about your career a little bit, because you touched on it, that you've been in 50 years in the industry, but it's not just 50 years in the industry. You were 50 years in one company, which is like unheard of in today's day and age. So can you spend a little bit of time talking about Brooklyn Union, how you started and how you moved up there?
I'd be happy to do that. Actually, I didn't start at Brooklyn Union. My first job at a city college was with AT&T, which in those years was 450,000 employees before they broke it up. And I was a junior engineer testing circuits in the basement of a building in Canal Street in Manhattan. Didn't think I wanted to spend my life doing that. I saw an ad in the paper that a company called Brooklyn Union was hiring engineers. I applied, and as they say, the rest is history. I got the job. Started as a junior engineer in the Brooklyn Union Gas Company, actually initially putting pipes in the ground in the boroughs of Brooklyn, Queens, and Staten Island, and had the good fortune, working hard, I guess, and a little bit of luck, to eventually become the CEO of Brooklyn Union. And Brooklyn Union actually went on to become Keyspan, came out to Long Island in 1998. That's when I really started getting involved on Long Island, because I'd lived here. And we grew Keyspan to be one of the larger utilities in the United States. And in 2007, an international energy company, National Grid, was looking for acquisitions in the U.S. They acquired Keyspan and kept me on for a couple of years as U.S. chairman of National Grid, and then I went on to do other things.
Yeah, I don't think they kept you on. I think they realized there was an asset there, so you were critical to what they've grown into, because National Grid has a pretty strong presence in the Northeast now. So you were critical for that. So you started off putting pipe in the ground.
Yeah.
Then you ended up running the company that put the pipe in the ground and made sure that the gas was there. What are your thoughts about natural gas in general, as an industry, where it was, where it is, where it's going? Because there's been a lot of talk about natural gas.
Yeah, interesting. When I started in the utility industry, actually, we didn't have natural gas. Well, natural gas had only just come here to the Northeast. Prior to that, there was something called manufactured gas, which was in some cases made from coal, believe it or not, or oil. And natural gas came into the Northeast in about the early 1950s. So when I started, in 1958, they had just converted the system from manufactured gas to natural gas. We went through a period in the 60s and 70s where there's tremendous growth in converting natural gas, which was a cleaner burning fuel, from oil. Customers used oil, and that was the basic business that Brooklyn Union was in. We went through a period in the 70s when we actually thought we were running out of gas in the United States. And I led an effort to go up to Canada, and we brought Western Canadian gas into New York. And that was in the late 80s, early 90s. But there's been a tremendous transition, really due to technology, where we found that we have more natural gas here in the United States than we ever thought we had. We're actually exporting natural gas to other countries around the world. Now, it is a fossil fuel, and when it burns, it has some emissions. It's the cleanest of the fossil fuels, so I think it has a role as we make the transition from fossil fuels to eventually to renewables. I know there's some controversy now about natural gas because it is a fossil fuel, but as I say, it's the cleanest burning of fossil fuels. And I think it has to be used as we move to cleaner renewable energies. So I think there's a role for natural gas in the immediate future. Not sure how long that is. And then with new technologies making the use of natural gas more efficient, more economic, more environmentally sensitive, I think it can play an important role as we make the transition to renewable energy.
Right. And I'm thinking a lot of what we do at the Energy Center, people focus on electricity, but natural gas plays a role in that. So what are your thoughts from what the Energy Center has done in the past, as well as forward-looking on the natural gas side of things?
Well, initially we focused on new technologies that allowed us to use natural gas more efficiently and in a more environmentally sensitive manner. But in the more recent future, we've focused on and have established a Gas Technology Institute out at the Energy Center to focus not only on the new technologies that use natural gas better, but to also look at renewable gas. Because the future of gas is probably moving to the renewable sector. So we're doing research now into how do you produce renewable gas, how do you utilize new renewable gas, so that you really make the gas system, which is in place, viable for the future. So we're focusing now on improving the technologies and developing renewable gas streams.
Great. And we'll be talking with Devinder Mahajan in a later session, and Devinder will dive into that a lot deeper as well. So
Right.
thank you for pushing that forward.
Okay, and Devinder is leading that effort.
He is leading that charge, so looking forward to talking to him. So when you were at college, jumping back to college for a second, did you learn about business, management styles? Did you learn about innovation? Did you learn about entrepreneurship? Was that anything that was covered in college back when you were going?
Well, not really. As a matter of fact, when I first started in college, I didn't start in engineering because my high school college advisor didn't think I could make it as an engineer.
Little did he know.
Well, it was really because the high school I went to was in those days called an academic high school as compared to the Brooklyn Techs and Stuyvesant, which were much more technically oriented. And going to City College, I would be competing with those students. So I spent a year in the liberal arts school, which I think helped me a little bit in rounding me, I guess, because I had an arts class, I had a speech class, I had a music class. Wouldn't have gotten that in engineering school. But to answer your question directly, I don't think there was anything that any courses I took in college that really prepared me for what I would later undertake in running a company, so to speak. I think that was mostly on-the-job training, meeting with people, learning what it's like to deal with unions, learning how to manage people, how to make people feel good about their job, reward them if they do a good job, counsel them, help them if they don't do a good job. So I think most of that was really on-the-job training.
Okay. Yeah, because one of the buzzwords nowadays is this thing called customer discovery, which is basically understanding the wants and needs of your customer, whoever your customer is. So I'm assuming that concept, even though it may not have been called that, is something that you probably use strongly throughout your career.
Well, I think we didn't call it that, as you point out, but I think one of our focuses at Brooklyn Union was to focus on the customer. We provided customer service to the customers, and later in our career at Brooklyn Union, we actually established businesses that were focusing much more on the customer. We were a utility. We recognized early in the days the customers didn't have other choices, but we really wanted to feel good about us being the utility, providing services which were critical to their lives and their families. So customer service is what we called it then. And then as I again progressed in management, I think I try to take that same philosophy to our other stakeholders, most important being our employees, making them feel good about their jobs. And then, of course, the people who invested in us as a public utility. We had investors which supported our capital programs. So it was also important to focus on them as well.
Great, understood. So, Energy Center, you're the chairman. You've had a long career. You were retiring. What made you decide to take over the Energy Center and make that the focus of what you're doing now?
Well, things sometimes evolve in interesting in ways that you had never thought of. Actually, when we came out to Long Island, initially as Keyspan, we spent money on research and development, even though at that time it wasn't recoverable in our rates. We felt it was important to do. So I got to know Stony Brook. I got to know in particular the engineering school and Dr. Shamash, who was the dean of the engineering school. So we started doing some research out at Stony Brook prior to my retiring. And when it came for me to think about retiring, I really wasn't sure what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And Dr. Shamash, Yaakov, as we affectionately called him, said to me, well, why don't you come out to Stony Brook? And I said, well, I'm not going to teach. And he said, no, why don't we come out and see how we can collaborate on things? So that's how the idea of the Energy Center was born. It was born in a collaboration with Yaakov Shamash. And we wanted to do something at Stony Brook that was different, And after a lot of thinking about it, we decided that maybe an energy center was the thing to do. So that's how it started. And that really has provided a great transition for me from being a business guy into an academic guy, but an academic guy who tries to bring the business perspective. And the initial focus, and still the focus of the Energy Center, is to do research to develop technologies which could be commercialized and create businesses and jobs.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's great stuff has happened at the Energy Center. One critical thing that's happened recently that you've been very involved with is the formation of the offshore wind consortium. Take a couple seconds and tell us about that and that whole effort.
Okay. Well, as I think most people know, there's a tremendous focus on renewable energy to meet more of our energy needs in the future. And wind and solar are the two majors that people talk about. Wind has the potential to providing the largest amount of that source of energy. So and looking at that at Stony Brook, we thought it would be interesting and probably important for us to start looking at wind and actually develop a wind technology center out at Stony Brook. As it turned out, the Department of Energy was thinking along the same lines. They put out one of their proposals on the street for a $20 million research fund. New York State thought it was important to match that, so NYSERDA matched those funds. They asked us at the Energy Center, me in particular, to be the chairman, and the good news is we won. So we now have a $40 million fund to do research to develop the technologies which are actually going to bring the cost of offshore wind down long term. That's the primary focus of the Wind Center, and we're in the process of putting that together right now.
Great. And so the ultimate goal is we want to start driving an offshore wind ecosystem here in the U.S. to meet all of these lofty standards that everyone is putting forward on for having renewables in general.
That's correct. The goals that the states have put out, New York in particular, are quite aggressive and quite lofty. I think they're achievable long term, but in order to achieve those goals, a couple of things are going to have to happen. One, we need to bring the costs down. We have to develop the technologies that can do that. We also, as you mentioned, have to develop the ecosystem. They have to be the businesses that support an offshore wind industry, which we really don't have here in the United States. So while research is the initial focus of the Wind Consortium, its long-term goal is to create actually the jobs and the support systems to support a wind industry, not only here in the Northeast, but in the United States as well.
Great. Well, I'm looking forward to that. So in closing, give you the final say. What are your thoughts for the Energy Center moving forward? Any quick thoughts on what we should focus on in addition to the offshore wind?
Well, I think our goal stays the same, to do research, to develop the technologies which can be commercialized and create businesses and create jobs. I think the answer to meeting our energy needs long term is in new technologies. And in order for those new technologies to be successful, businesses have to be created and jobs have to be created. So as part of that, we have to figure out now how we incorporate renewables into the energy mix and make them a more viable and a greater part of our energy mix. So I think that's the goal of the Energy Center going forward.
Yeah, great. Well, you set the table for us. Hopefully we'll be able to continue to move it forward. And with that, Bob, thank you very much. I'm Dave Hamilton, and this was Energy.